It was a bright summer morning when the Johnson family stepped through the sliding glass doors of the bustling airport. Dr. Anthony Johnson, one of the top brain surgeons in the country, gently guided his sleepy children through the crowded terminal. His wife Denise walked beside him, checking their flight details on her phone. Their two kids, Maya 14 and Isaiah 12, trailed behind, wheeling their colorful suitcases across the shiny floor. "Dad, are we really going to an island where nobody else will be?" Maya asked, her eyes lighting up despite having woken up at 5 a.m. She wore her favorite purple hoodie and worn-in sneakers, her hair tied back in a simple ponytail. Anthony smiled at his daughter. "That's right, sweetheart. Just us, the beach, and all the books you wanted to bring." He wasn't just any doctor, he was the kind whose patients waited months to see him, the kind who performed surgeries other doctors thought impossible. But at home, he was simply Dad, the man who made pancakes on Sundays and never missed a school concert. "I packed my snorkel gear," Isaiah chimed in, practically bouncing as he walked. "Do you think we'll see sharks?" Unlike his more reserved sister, Isaiah couldn't contain his excitement, his energy bubbling over despite the early hour. "Small ones, maybe," Denise answered with a laugh. "Nothing dangerous." As a top attorney who handled cases for major companies, she was used to swimming with sharks of a different kind. Today, though, she had traded her usual power suits for comfortable jeans and a simple blouse. Her natural hair was wrapped in a colorful scarf, and for once she wore no makeup. This vacation was about letting go of the professional masks they wore daily. The airport was already packed with morning travelers. Business people in suits rushed by with coffee cups. Families herded sleepy children. Airline staff directed the flow of humanity through the maze of check-in counters. The air smelled of coffee, perfume, and the particular mix of cleaning products airports always use. As they made their way deeper into the terminal, Anthony checked his watch. They were right on time. This trip had been in the works for months, a surprise gift for Denise's 40th birthday. For once, they weren't flying first class. They weren't even going through the normal check-in process. "Do you see the man with the sign?" Anthony asked, scanning the crowd. Denise spotted him first, a uniformed man holding a small tablet with Johnson Family displayed on the screen. "There," she pointed, "by the premium lounge entrance." The family changed direction, heading away from the main check-in area where most travelers were lining up. Anthony had worked extra surgeries for 6 months to afford this trip. Denise had won a huge case that came with a substantial bonus. Together, they had saved enough for something they had never done before, chartering a private plane. Neither Anthony nor Denise had grown up with money. He had been raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs. She had lived in public housing until college. Everything they had now, they had earned through years of hard work, student loans, and sacrifices. This vacation was more than just a trip, it was a celebration of how far they had come. "I think we're supposed to go through that door," Anthony said, noticing the discreet entrance marked Private Aviation near where the uniformed man stood. Isaiah's eyes widened. "We're not going with everyone else." "Not this time," Denise replied, unable to hide her own excitement. She squeezed Anthony's hand, still amazed that they had managed to keep the private jet a secret from the kids. "This is a special trip." The family approached the man with the sign, unaware that they were being watched by judging eyes from across the terminal. They were simply a family starting their vacation, dressed for comfort rather than to impress. Their designer luggage was at home. They carried practical suitcases that had accompanied them on many trips before. Nothing about them screamed wealth or privilege, nothing except where they were heading. On the other side of the terminal, 52-year-old Patricia Whitfield stood in the priority check-in line, tapping her red-bottomed shoes against the polished floor. The rhythmic click-click-click matched her rising irritation as the line moved forward at what felt like a snail's pace. 3 pieces of designer luggage were arranged perfectly beside her, the matching set having cost more than some people's monthly rent. "Can you believe it?" She spoke loudly into her phone, not caring who heard her. 40 minutes to check in, even in the priority line. "I specifically booked first class to avoid this nonsense." She flipped her highlighted bob haircut away from her face with a practiced motion. "No, I told Franklin we absolutely cannot stay at that hotel again." The thread count on their sheets was abysmal. The airport staff at the premium counter exchanged knowing glances as they heard Patricia's voice. She was a regular traveler and a regular headache. Just last month, she had demanded to speak to 3 levels of management because her pre-ordered gluten-free meal had come with a roll on the side. The month before that, she had written a scathing online review because a flight attendant had asked her to stow her oversized bag properly. Flying commercial is such a burden, Patricia continued into her phone, her voice carrying across the terminal. But Jeffrey needed the jet for his golf trip to Scotland. She paused, listening to whoever was on the other end. Of course he didn't offer to drop me in Miami first. Men can be so inconsiderate. As she spoke, Patricia's attention drifted across the terminal. Her eyes, sharpened by years of looking for faults in everything and everyone, noticed the Johnson family approaching the premium area. A conversation momentarily forgotten, she watched them with growing disapproval. "Rebecca, I'll call you back," she said suddenly, ending her call without waiting for a response. The family didn't look like they belonged in the premium section, at least not according to Patricia's narrow view of the world. The father wore ordinary jeans and a plain button-up shirt that hadn't come from any designer Patricia recognized. The mother had on simple clothes with no visible luxury brands. The children were dressed like typical kids, practical, comfortable, nothing flashy. They must be lost, Patricia muttered to herself, her eyes narrowing as she watched them bypass the regular line and head directly toward the exclusive area marked private aviation. The family moved with the easy confidence of people who knew exactly where they were going. Patricia couldn't stand it. In her mind, certain spaces were reserved for certain types of people, people like her, who made sure everyone knew their status by how they dressed, what they carried, and how they spoke. Her perfectly lipsticked mouth pressed into a thin line as she watched the uniformed attendant greet the family warmly. The attendant was smiling, actually smiling, at them as if they were VIPs. Something about this struck Patricia as deeply wrong. She had spent thousands on her outfit, hair, and accessories, yet the attendant helping her had been efficient but cool. First they let anyone into first class, and now this, she murmured, loud enough for the businessman standing behind her to hear. He shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Patricia lifted her chin and adjusted her designer scarf. She had been flying from this airport for over 20 years. She knew all the premium lounges, all the VIP shortcuts, all the staff who could be intimidated into giving extras. She considered herself an expert on airport social hierarchy, and in that hierarchy, families like the Johnsons belonged in the main terminal with everyone else. A flight announcement came over the PA system, but Patricia barely heard it. She had found something, someone to focus her irritation on, and years of experience had taught her that making others uncomfortable often made her feel better. With a quick check of her reflection in her phone screen and a tug to straighten her expensive blazer, Patricia stepped out of the priority line. "Excuse me," she said to the woman behind her. "I need to address something. Hold my place." Without waiting for a response, she began walking purposefully across the terminal toward the Johnson family, her heels clicking sharply against the floor like approaching thunder. Patricia marched across the terminal floor, her designer handbag swinging rhythmically from her arm. The confident click of her heels announced her approach like a warning bell, causing a few travelers to glance up from their phones. She had the walk of someone who expected others to move out of her way, and mostly they did. The Johnson family was speaking with the attendant at the private aviation desk when Patricia arrived like an uninvited storm cloud. She positioned herself directly beside them, standing just a bit too close for comfort, her expensive perfume creating an invisible boundary around the space she occupied. "Excuse me," Patricia said loudly, her voice cutting through the ambient noise of the terminal. Nearby travelers looked up, sensing the drama about to unfold. Some pretended to look at their phones while watching from the corner of their eyes. Others stared openly, grateful for any distraction from the boredom of waiting for their flights. Anthony Johnson turned, surprised by the interruption. His wife Denise was in the middle of showing their IDs to the attendant, while the children stood quietly beside their luggage. "Can I help you?" Anthony asked politely, his voice calm and measured, the same tone he used with anxious patients before surgery. Patricia's heavily mascara-coated eyes narrowed. "I believe you're in the wrong area," she said, her voice dripping with false helpfulness. The economy check-in is over there. She pointed a manicured finger toward the longer general line across the terminal, where dozens of travelers waited with their suitcases. The attendant behind the desk looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, I'm actually helping these customers right." "I'm just trying to be helpful," Patricia interrupted, speaking over the attendant while keeping her eyes fixed on the Johnson family. "It's easy to get confused in these big airports." Denise Johnson turned from the desk, her professional instincts kicking in. As an attorney, she was used to people who tried to throw their weight around. "Thank you for your concern, but we're exactly where we need to be," she said with a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Patricia's lipsticked mouth formed a tight line. "This area is for premium passengers," she insisted, her voice growing louder. "First class and private aviation clients." She glanced pointedly at the family's practical luggage and casual clothes. By now, a small audience had gathered. A businessman pretending to check his boarding pass, a young couple whispering to each other, an elderly woman frowning disapprovingly at Patricia. "Mom," Maya whispered, tugging at Denise's sleeve. "Everyone's staring." Isaiah shifted uncomfortably beside his sister, his earlier excitement about the trip dimming as he sensed the tension in the air. "We are premium passengers," Anthony began to explain, his voice still level despite the public embarrassment building. "We're actually—" Patricia cut him off with a dismissive wave of her hand. "I've been flying from this airport for 20 years, she said condescendingly. "I know how everything works here." She adjusted her designer scarf as if to emphasize her point about belonging in premium spaces. The attendant tried again. "Ma'am, if you could please return to your line. I can assure you that Dr. Johnson and his family are—" "Doctor?" Patricia raised an eyebrow, looking Anthony up and down with obvious disbelief. His comfortable travel clothes and unassuming demeanor didn't match her image of what a doctor should look like. "Yes, Dr. Johnson is one of our frequent flyers," the attendant confirmed, a note of firmness entering his voice. Patricia wasn't backing down. "Well, even doctors should know where they're supposed to check in," she said with a tight smile. "And this area is clearly not meant for—" She paused, her eyes sweeping over the family once more. "For everyone." The implication hung in the air, as unmistakable as it was uncomfortable. Several onlookers exchanged glances. An airport security officer stationed nearby began watching the interaction more closely. Denise placed a protective hand on Isaiah's shoulder, feeling him tense under her touch. Anthony's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his voice remained steady. "I believe the attendant was helping us before you interrupted," he said quietly. "Perhaps you should return to your line before you lose your place." By now, a small crowd had gathered around the unfolding drama. Travelers with time to kill before their flights stopped pretending not to watch. A young woman recording a travel vlog for her social media pointed her phone in the direction of the confrontation. Two gate agents from a nearby counter exchanged knowing looks. They had seen this type of scene before. Patricia stood with her weight shifted to one hip, her designer purse dangling from her forearm, looking for all the world like she was the one being inconvenienced. The flush on her cheeks wasn't from embarrassment, but from the thrill of having an audience. "I don't know why you people always think you can just go wherever you want," she said, raising her voice to make sure everyone could hear. The words "you people" hung in the air like a neon sign, their meaning unmistakable to everyone within earshot. A collective intake of breath came from the onlookers. An older gentleman shook his head in disapproval. A flight attendant passing by slowed her pace, concerned about what was happening. Isaiah, the Johnsons' 12-year-old son, shifted uncomfortably and looked down at his sneakers. His earlier excitement about seeing sharks while snorkeling was replaced by the wish to become invisible. Maya, his 14-year-old sister, stood straighter, lifting her chin in a supple mirror of her mother's posture. Anthony placed a protective hand on Isaiah's shoulder, giving it a gentle squeeze. His face remained calm, but those who knew him well would recognize the slight tightening around his eyes, the same expression he wore during the most difficult surgeries when complications arose. "Some of us," Patricia continued, gesturing to her expensive outfit and luggage, "actually paid for these privileges." She looked around at the gathering crowd as if seeking confirmation, but found mostly uncomfortable or disapproving faces. An airport security officer in a crisp uniform began walking toward the group, having noticed the disturbance from his post near the security checkpoint. His face was professional but alert as he assessed the situation. Patricia noticed him approaching and smirked, assuming he was coming to remove the Johnson family from the premium line. She adjusted her scarf and straightened her posture, ready to be vindicated. Finally, she muttered, just loud enough for the Johnsons to hear, "Security knows who belongs where." Denise Johnson, who had remained remarkably composed, spoke quietly to her children. "Remember what we've talked about. Some people's hearts are too small to see others clearly." The words were gentle but carried enough for those nearby to hear. A woman standing close by nodded in approval. A teenager who had been watching while waiting for his own flight looked at Denise with admiration. The security officer approached the group, his steps measured and deliberate. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his gaze moving between Patricia and the Johnson family. Before anyone could answer, Patricia jumped in. "Yes, there is. These people are in the wrong area. This is for premium passengers only." She emphasized the word premium as if it were a club that had strict membership requirements. The officer turned toward the attendant at the desk, who had been trying unsuccessfully to defuse the situation. "Can you confirm if these passengers are in the correct area?" The attendant nodded. "Yes, Officer Chen. Dr. Johnson and his family are checked in for private aviation. Their paperwork is all in order." Patricia's mouth opened slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Well, there must be some mistake." "They clearly don't." She trailed off, realizing how the rest of that sentence would sound in front of the security officer. Officer Chen raised an eyebrow, waiting for her to finish her thought. When she didn't, he turned back to the Johnsons. "I apologize for the disturbance. Dr. Johnson, is everything all right here?" Anthony nodded calmly. "We're fine, thank you. Just a misunderstanding about where we should be." His grace in the face of Patricia's behavior made her look even more unreasonable by contrast. The crowd that had gathered was now firmly on the Johnson side. Several people were shaking their heads at Patricia. A few had phones out, recording the incident discreetly. The older gentleman who had shaken his head earlier muttered something about disgraceful behavior, just loud enough to be heard. The tense standoff was interrupted by the arrival of a sharply dressed man in a navy uniform with gold stripes on the sleeves. He walked with purpose, carrying a tablet and wearing an earpiece. His polished shoes barely made a sound on the terminal floor as he approached, a stark contrast to Patricia's attention-demanding heels. "Dr. Johnson," he called out, his voice clear and professional. He nodded respectfully at Anthony as he approached the group. Anthony turned, relief briefly flickering across his face. "Yes, that's me." The man smiled warmly at the family. "I'm Captain Reeves. I'll be your pilot today." He glanced briefly at Patricia, then at Officer Chen, before continuing. "I hope there's no problem here." Patricia's face froze mid-expression, her eyebrows stuck halfway up her forehead. The words "your pilot" hung in the air, forcing her to recalculate everything she thought she knew about the family she had been harassing. "No problem at all," Anthony replied calmly. "Just a bit of confusion about where we should be." Captain Reeves nodded. "Well, I'm glad to tell you that all pre-flight checks have been completed. Your jet is fueled and ready for boarding whenever you're comfortable." He turned his attention to the children. "And I have it on good authority that the co-pilot brought along some special treats for our younger passengers." Isaiah's eyes widened, his earlier discomfort momentarily forgotten. "We really have our own pilot," he whispered to his sister, who looked equally impressed despite trying to maintain her teenage composure. Captain Reeves continued, "We've stocked the aircraft with the refreshments you requested, Dr. Johnson. The champagne is chilling for you and Mrs. Johnson, and we have those sparkling juices the children enjoyed on your last flight." The onlookers who had gathered to watch the confrontation now exchanged glances of surprise and amusement. The revelation was spreading through the crowd in whispers and nudges. This wasn't just a case of a family being in the first-class line when they should have been in economy. The Johnsons weren't just premium passengers, they had chartered an entire private jet. Patricia stood frozen, her mouth slightly open, her designer handbag now hanging limply from her arm. Her entire performance had been based on the assumption that she was the superior traveler, the one with status and privilege. That story was collapsing in real time. Captain Reeves checked something on his tablet. The weather at your destination looks perfect. Clear skies, 82 degrees, and the caretaker of the island called to confirm that everything is prepared for your arrival. The island? Patricia couldn't help herself from asking, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Captain Reeves looked at her with mild confusion, clearly wondering why this stranger was inserting herself into the conversation. Yes, the private island Dr. Johnson has rented for his wife's birthday celebration. He turned back to the family. If you're ready, we have a golf cart waiting to take you to the private aviation terminal. It's about a 5-minute ride. Officer Chen, who had been watching the scene unfold, stepped forward. I'd be happy to escort Dr. Johnson and his family to their transportation, he offered, giving Patricia a pointed look that suggested she should return to her own business. The staff at the private aviation desk were already gathering the Johnsons' luggage onto a sleek cart. A young woman in a matching uniform approached with boarding passes and VIP tags. Your luggage will be loaded directly onto the aircraft, she explained to Denise, and we've prepared the cabin according to your preferences from your last flight. Thank you, Denise replied with a gracious smile. The kids always sleep better with those extra pillows you provide. The crowd that had gathered was beginning to disperse, but not before many of them shot disapproving looks at Patricia. Some were openly smirking at her discomfort. A few were still recording discreetly on their phones. Maya leaned close to her brother. Look at her face, she whispered, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. Maya, Denise said quietly, having overheard. Remember, what matters most is how we respond, not how others react. But even as she spoke, a tiny smile played at the corner of her mouth. Patricia took a small step backward, her face flushing red. The security officer was watching her, waiting to see if she would cause any further disturbance. The pilot was politely ignoring her existence, and the family she had tried to humiliate was being treated like royalty right before her eyes. Patricia stood rooted to the spot, clutching her designer purse with white-knuckled fingers. The terminal continued to buzz with activity around her, but for a moment it felt like everyone was watching her, and they were. Several travelers lingered nearby, their phones suspiciously positioned as if they were checking messages while actually recording the scene. Excuse me, ma'am. The voice belonged to the priority check-in agent who had been helping Patricia before she decided to cause a scene. Your place in line has been filled. You'll need to return to the back of the queue when you're ready. The agent's tone was professionally polite, but there was a hint of satisfaction in her eyes. A middle-aged woman walking past muttered just loud enough to be heard, "That's what happens when you assume." Her companion nodded in agreement, both of them looking pointedly at Patricia. Meanwhile, the Johnson family was being ushered toward the exit leading to the private aviation terminal. Officer Chen walked slightly ahead, clearing a path through the busy terminal. Captain Reeves fell into step beside Anthony, discussing the expected flight time. Your jet is the Gulfstream G650, the captain explained. We should have you on the island in just under 3 hours, weather permitting. Two young airport employees who had been watching the whole scene whispered to each other as the family passed. Isn't that Dr. Johnson? The one who did that surgery on the kid from the Children's Hospital fundraiser? Yeah, that's him. My cousin's kid was his patient, said he's the most down-to-earth doctor they've ever met. Patricia overheard their conversation, each word landing like another blow to her fragile ego. Not only were the Johnsons wealthy enough to charter a private jet, but they were apparently well-respected within the community. The doctor she had tried to humiliate was known for his humanitarian work. As the Johnsons reached the exit door, Denise turned and caught Patricia's eye. There were many things she could have said or done in that moment. She could have gloated or thrown a caustic remark. She could have pointed and laughed. She could have encouraged the bystanders who were recording to post their videos online. Instead, Denise simply smiled, not a smug smile, but one that somehow made Patricia feel even smaller. Then Denise turned to her husband and said, just loud enough to carry, "Anthony, we should make a donation to that airport staff appreciation fund we talked about. The service here is always excellent, even when dealing with difficult situations." A few travelers who heard the comment nodded in approval. A gray-haired woman gave Denise a thumbs up. Before the family disappeared through the door, Maya, the 14-year-old, looked back at Patricia. Unlike her mother, Maya's face couldn't hide her feelings quite as well. There was hurt there, but also a flicker of satisfaction at seeing justice served. As the door closed behind the Johnson family, the spell seemed to break. The remaining onlookers began to disperse, many of them glancing at their phones and tapping at screens. Patricia had a sinking feeling that her face would be appearing on social media platforms within minutes. "Did you see that?" A college-aged man said to his friend as they walked past Patricia. "Total Karen gets owned moment. That's definitely going viral." His friend laughed. The private jet reveal was like something out of a movie. Patricia's cheeks burned as she made her way back to the priority check-in line. The agent who had called her back gave her a cool, professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Your boarding pass, Ms. Whitfield." As she took the first-class boarding pass, the same one she had been bragging about earlier, it somehow felt less impressive. Just a piece of paper that entitled her to a slightly wider seat and a free glass of champagne. Nothing compared to the private Gulfstream that was waiting for the family she had tried to humiliate. Her phone buzzed in her purse. It was a text from her friend Rebecca. "Patricia, is that you in this TikTok video? It's already got 10,000 views. Call me." 2 hours later, Patricia sat alone in the airport bar, nursing an overpriced glass of white wine. Her flight to Miami had been delayed another hour, and she couldn't face the crowded waiting area where she had spotted at least 3 people giving her strange looks and then checking their phones. Her social media notifications had been buzzing nonstop, forcing her to turn her phone to silent. She scrolled through the comments on the TikTok video that had now reached over 50,000 views. The captions were brutal. "Airport Karen gets schooled by private jet family, and when judging others goes terribly wrong." Most of the comments sided firmly with the Johnson family, praising their dignity and restraint in the face of Patricia's behavior. One comment in particular made her pause. Maybe next time she'll think twice before assuming she knows everything about strangers. Patricia took a large sip of her wine. Meanwhile, 30,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean, the Johnson family was settled comfortably in their private jet. The cabin was spacious and elegantly appointed, with soft leather seats that reclined fully into beds. Isaiah was sprawled out on the couch at the back, playing a video game on the built-in entertainment system. Maya sat across from her parents, working on homework she'd brought along. "You handled that situation beautifully," Anthony said quietly to his wife, their hands intertwined on the armrest between them. I was about to lose my cool. Denise smiled. "It's what I do in the courtroom every day. Never let them see you sweat." She squeezed his hand. "Besides, I wanted to set the right example for the kids." From her seat, Maya looked up. "Mom, why didn't you tell that lady off? She was being so rude, and you just smiled at her." Denise considered the question, seeing it as a teaching moment. "Maya, what would yelling back have accomplished?" Maya shrugged. "It would have felt good." "For about 10 seconds, Denise agreed. "And then what? Would it have changed her mind? Would it have made us happier on our vacation?" "I guess not," Maya admitted. Anthony joined the conversation. The best response to people like that isn't to sink to their level. It's to rise above it and keep moving forward. He glanced at his son, who had paused his game to listen. "Both of you are going to face people who judge you unfairly throughout your lives. They'll make assumptions about you based on how you look, where you come from, or the color of your skin. Like how that lady thought we couldn't afford to be in first class, let alone have our own plane," Isaiah observed, his young face serious. "Exactly," Denise nodded. "But what matters is how you respond. You can let that ignorance define your day, or you can choose to keep living your life on your own terms." Back at the airport, Patricia's flight was finally boarding. As she stood in the priority line, she couldn't help but notice that none of the staff greeted her with the usual deference. The flight attendant checking boarding passes barely made eye contact. Word had spread quickly among the airport staff about the first-class Karen who had harassed a family only to discover they were chartering a private jet. As Patricia settled into her first-class seat, she found herself thinking about the Johnson children. The way the boy had looked down at his shoes, embarrassed. The protective stance of the father. Most of all, the dignified response of the mother, who could have humiliated Patricia but chose not to. For the first time, she considered how her words must have sounded to them. What assumptions had been behind her actions? Why had she felt so entitled to question their presence in the premium area? The uncomfortable answers floated at the edges of her consciousness, but she wasn't quite ready to acknowledge them fully. Patricia's phone buzzed with another notification. Her nephew had texted, "Aunt Pat, is this you in this video? Not cool." Attached was yet another social media link, this one with even more views than the last. She switched her phone to airplane mode and closed her eyes, suddenly exhausted. The champagne the flight attendant placed beside her without a smile went untouched. Meanwhile, the Johnson family's jet began its descent toward the private island. As the tropical paradise came into view, the airport confrontation already felt like a distant memory, a small bump in the road not worth dwelling on during their special family time together.